Hi guys, and welcome to Total Technik. In this video we're doing a rear diff oil change. This process is identical for the majority of vehicles across the VAG range. Audi, VW, Seat, Skoda, Porsche, etc. So if you're looking to change the fluid in your rear diff, chances are this is exactly the process you will need. Let's do it. So the first thing you need to have a little think about is access. Obviously your rear diff is located between the rear wheels here at the rear of the car, and you're going to have to get some access to be able to work on this safely. Now when it comes to access, this is going to vary massively depending on what vehicle you have. This is an Audi Q7 that we happen to be working on today, which is obviously a mid to large size SUV, and so the space isn't too bad. You can just about get underneath there, and if you have the air suspension on your Audi Q7, obviously you can just lift that up. If you're working on something like an Audi A4, an Audi A3, much smaller car, much lower to the ground, then obviously you're going to have to be looking at lifting the car. And when it comes to lifting the car for doing these fluid changes, the most important thing you need to realise is these are wholly reliant, as you'll see later on in the process, on gravity. So what you can't do is just jack up the rear of the car, because obviously then your car's no longer level. You need to lift all four corners up evenly, because your car must be level, because without gravity being correct, you won't be able to do this procedure correctly. So that's really, really important. Now if you are going to lift the car evenly, obviously you've got to do it safely, and so you're going to need something like 4 axle stands. So it's not the easiest thing to do, but that's the most important thing. However you're going to lift the vehicle to get the access, you must remember that it must be lifted evenly. You can't jack one end of the car. So let's have a quick look at how the rear diff works in relation to the fill process. It's really, really simple. What we have normally located on the bottom, for obvious reasons, we have the drain plug, which is like a little plug with a hex head usually in it. And then the other one you want to look for is the fill plug, and that's normally located somewhere on the side. On this Audi Q7 here, it's located towards the rear. So this is what we have: a drain plug and a fill plug. And so the way that this basically works is we use gravity, which is why your car needs to be level, not jacked up. Use gravity to fill the difference between them. So what we're essentially going to do is take this out. We will drain the old fluid out of there, then we'll put the drain plug back in, and then we'll fill it until the fluid starts to overflow out of the fill port right here. When it gets to that level, it's reached the correct level. That's how much fluid should be in that diff. And then you put that back in, torque it back up to spec, and that's job done. So you can see that the basic principle of it is actually fairly simple. So the main thing that you need to make sure that you've got is the correct specification of oil for your diff, and in the correct quantity. This is going to vary depending on your particular model across the VAG Group. We're doing an Audi Q7 today, which is 75W90 on a GL5 oil. But like I said, that will vary, so your best bet is to do a quick Google search for your specific make and model to double check that you're definitely getting the right fluid for the diff. The other thing you might want to look at getting, depending on the condition of your old plugs, is you may want to look at possibly getting replacement plugs. The ones on this particular vehicle are quite rusty, so we have the replacements right here, just in case. And we'll put the part numbers and information for these all on screen for you. So if you need any of those, these are the correct ones for the diff on this Q7. So before we get on to the actual job of doing our oil drain and refill, it's best to do this job if the car's a little bit warm. So if you can, take the car for a quick 5 or 10 minute drive down the road. What that will allow it to do, it will allow this your old fluid to warm up a little bit, and so when you do your drain, it will be thinner, and it will you'll likely get a much better drain. So a quick 5 to 10 minute drive around the block prior to doing this job is always useful. Now our plugs are a little bit scabby, so I'm just going to give them a bit of a clear out. The reason I do this is to make sure that when I put that bit in there, I've got rid of all the loose dirt and bits out of there. So when I put my bit in there, it will go in as deep as possible into the socket there. And so that's going to reduce the likelihood of it rounding out. If I leave all the dirt and stuff in there, I only put my bit in halfway, then obviously that could round out quite easily. If I give it a good clean out first and make sure that it gets right to the very, very end, then obviously the chances of it rounding out, it can still happen, but you've greatly reduced that likelihood. The thing I'm going to do is just gently put my little hook tool around the edge here, because we've got a bit of a build-up of scum. obviously not been done for a little while. So I'm just trying to make these as easy as possible to get out. So all that kind of, we've got some kind of calcified stuff around it here. All that will stop that head turning. If I just get rid of 75% of that before I try turning it, then it will definitely help, and it certainly won't do any harm. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some penetration fluid on. We're using Plus Gas, but they do dozens of different brands. Liquid wrench, all that kind of thing. WD-40's also pretty decent at this. And obviously I'm not trying to get this through to the thread, but if I can just get it around the edge of the head, just there, it will just help a little bit when it comes to trying to crack this off. It'll only be a minor help, but anything that you can take that helps you when it comes to these things, it can only be a positive. So on our rear diffs, as we mentioned before, we have the drain plug and we have the fill plug. Now the next logical step would be, okay, well I'll undo this plug here and drain the fluid. That's definitely not what you do. First thing you should do is always take the top plug out first. The reason being that if this were to round out, or you just can't get this out for any reason, and you've already drained it, you've got no way of being able to get that fluid back into this diff. And so it will become an absolute nightmare, and you're going to be stuck on your driveway. You're probably going to have to get your car towed. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. So before you ever think about draining the fluid from any of these kind of gravity fill systems, always make sure that you're able to fill it before you drain it. So this is always the first one to be removed. So the first thing we need to do is actually remove our fill plug right here. They're usually hex heads. You want to grab a hex bit that's suitable for this, and access can vary quite a lot. We haven't got a lot of access in here. We've got this bar running across, so we've got a space of about this much. So we haven't got a lot of access on this Q7. Sometimes the access is great, sometimes it's not. So I don't think we're going to get a bit and a wrench in there. So we're probably going to have to do it with a small bit and a spanner, something like that. But this is what you need to do: is grab the correct size bit for your fill plug, and we need to look at getting this removed. So because ours was so corroded, it's been really hard to get the bit in there. What we've had to do, because you can't hammer it from the outside, to kind of wedge it in using a pry bar, like so, just to get it into its maximum depth. It's been pretty tricky. So now we've got a long spanner here, so we're going to use that to try and slacken off the bit. Okay, so we have movement. Yes, we do. Okay, good. A little bit tricky. Wasn't too bad actually. They're not all that tight. So once you crack them off, they're okay. I can swap to my ratchet spanner now. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so we know that our fill port's good. So I'm just going to put that back in and just rescue my bit, and then the next stage is going to do the drain. Obviously before we undo this one, make sure that you've got a drain pan underneath it, because when you undo that, oil's going to come out. So make sure you've got your drain pan in place. It's always a good idea when you put the bit in, especially if they're a little bit rusty, give them a tap with a hammer. See how that managed to get that seated right to the end again, because if it's not all the way in, there's a chance that it could round out. So just a little tap, make sure it's fully seated before you undo it. So now you want to leave this until all of the fluids are drained out and you've just got a very, very slow drip. So we've got about as much as we're going to get out of there. So now I'm just going to give it a bit of a clean up before we refit the plug. So I'm going to be refitting the old plug. This one was okay. The one that was the fill plug I really didn't like the look of, so we'll be replacing that one with a brand new one. So now we need to torque this up to the proper spec. So for our Audi Q7 here, it's 35 Newton meters. If you're doing a different make or model, obviously that will vary. You should do a Google search for that. So the next thing we need to think about is how we're going to get the oil into our filler port right here. Now if you take your car to a professional garage or an Audi workshop, they'll have a fluid pump that can actually pump the fluid uphill, and that will go in there. Now obviously if you don't have that luxury at home, we're going to need to use gravity to help us get this get the fluid into this hole. Now this will depend upon your particular make and model. What you need to do is we're going to use a piece of tubing, and what you need to do is route that tubing the best way that you can around these components, so that you can fill it from the side of the car, if you like. And you must make sure that that tube where you're going to be filling it is higher than obviously the point that you're going to be filling, because we're going to be using gravity. So first thing to do is find a piece of suitable tubing, and when you put this in, what you want to try and do is make sure, you see this is because it's been rolled, it's got a kind of a natural curve in this direction. So when I put this in, I want that to be facing downward, so that it's actually putting the fluid down into the diff. Obviously if I put that upwards into that hole like so, then it's going to come out of the end and it's going to be dripping back down the pipe, and it's going to might give us a false reading as it starts to flow out of the hole. If I turn that over and the hole's here, obviously it's lower than the hole, and so it'll have to fill just slightly above the pipe to then start coming out. So if you've got a natural bend in the pipe, or you can obviously make one, you want it to be going slightly downward when you put it into the hole. So you've just got to find the best way to route it through. That will do us. And put it a good couple of inches into the hole, and that'll take us to this stage here. And then we need to find a point at which we can kind of get this up kind of into the wheel arch or away from the side of the car, where you can actually start putting the oil in. So I brought my tubing up into the wheel arch area on this Q7 that we're working on. That's going to give me enough space here to start putting the oil down into the pipe there. You can use obviously a slightly longer pipe than we've got here and bring it kind of to the outside and do it on the outside of the wheel arch just here. But that's what you want. You want to make sure obviously that your pipe and all of the pipe work from here to the end is all higher than that fill port, and all we're going to be doing is putting our oil down into this tube. So it just so happens that the particular oil we're using has this kind of a nozzle on it, which will be perfect for inserting into our plastic piping. Now you may not have that, you might just have a traditional screw-on, screw-off cap, and so what you might have to do in place of this is you might have to attach a funnel to the end of your plastic tubing, and then obviously pour that slowly into the funnel and let that drain down. When you're squeezing the bottle here, you'll probably find you have to stop every now and again. Just let a little bit of air in and then carry on. Just makes squeezing the bottle a little bit easier, allows the bottle to expand each time. As we can see here, we're just starting to get our first few drips from our overflow of the level. Now it's a good idea to gently rotate the wheels a few times in both directions. This will just help ensure that everything's moving around and getting as much out as possible. So next, it's always a good idea to leave this until it goes to a virtual stop on the drips here, and then wait about 5 to 10 minutes just to make sure that there's no kind of air pockets in there, and you've rotated the wheels and you've made sure that everything is as it should be in there, you're circulating it. And then once you've done all that and you've waited 5 to 10 minutes, then what you can do is you can squirt just a little bit more in, and you should see that will start coming out immediately. All you need is one little quick squirt, and you should see that it shouldn't really take much more fluid, it should come out straight away. If it does take a little bit more fluid to get it to drain, then that means that there was a kind of an air lock somewhere in there and you have got rid of it, so that's a good thing. So because I've still got some fluid in my tube, I'm just going to pull this out and cap it off as best as I can. There you go, and with the pipe removed, we can see we were a little bit over the level. Now I've already waited close to 10 minutes now. I've rotated the wheels several times. So I'm happy now that when that level slows to a drip, that there's definitely no air in the system, and it's circulated correctly. And so I'm happy now to close that off. So I've finished with this pipe now. Now I've got a slow drip, ready to refit the plug. We're fitting a brand new one here because the one we had previously wasn't in very good condition. So once you've hand tightened that, you need to grab your torque wrench and you need to torque that up to the factory specification. So now we want to give it a good clean up. I've got a degreaser right here, so I'm going to give it a quick clean. Especially, you can see just under there, got a little bit of the old oil. Well, it's actually a new oil technically, just there. So you want to make sure that you clean this up properly, because what you want to do later in the process, in a day or two, you want to stick your head back under the car and make sure that you don't have any leaks from either of these plugs. So if I left that like that, I might think that that's a leak. So you want to get rid of any traces of the old fluid with a good cleaner. So when you look under here again, you'll be able to see a new leak immediately. So our fluid is now installed and fully sealed. So what you want to do is you want to take your car for a quick test drive and make sure that everything feels as it should. When you get back from that test drive, shine a torch under the car, especially around these two plugs, which are the only things that you've removed. Just make sure that you haven't got any signs of any drips or leaks. Likewise, the following morning, once your car has cooled down properly from your test drive, before you hop in it and go to work or whatever it is you're doing the next day, again, just quickly shine the torch down here and make sure that you haven't got any visible leaks from there. So there we go, that's job done. That's how you change the oil in your rear diff. As you can see, it is a fairly straightforward process. Thanks for watching, we really appreciate it. If you could take 1 second out of your busy schedule to hit that like button, it really helps us out. And likewise, if you could consider subscribing to our channel, we've got hundreds more Audi and VW videos waiting for you to check out. We appreciate it, we'll see you again.